Okay, so welcome to our April story time and story time number 62. And our closest thing to a spring equinox or autumn equinox or Easter story. So we've got lots of good bunny ears and spring things in our pictures looking wonderful. I've just noticed there's beautiful gardeny bits behind you as well, Mum and Dad.
Yeah, they're autumn leaves. So these are
Yeah, got gorgeous autumn bits.
yeah.
Beautiful. So our central themes today were, of course, bunnies and the equinox. And the other big one, I don't think anyone's gone with it, but unusual or less commonly popular musical instruments were also on our list of themes. What have you got there, Andrew?
One I made years ago when I was a student.
Oh, is this like a whittle whistle?
It's and it works.
Does it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Indonesia, was it? Yeah.
So is it a recorder or does it have a different name?
No, it doesn't have a different name, does it?
I don't know why.
It's not called a recorder. It doesn't have the back hole.
Oh, right. Okay. So more like a whistle, but it's the bulbous bit at the top is really interesting. Oh, we can't hear that.
Oh, really? Okay. So it's functional, but not, it's just still.
Oh, not my cat. Hello.
That's not a rabbit. I'm sorry.
Okay, so in addition, our sort of specific topics relating to the unusual musical instruments was a popular musician who plays something that's traditionally not a very popular instrument to play, and relevant to music, and places some of our group were last time, a WOMAD or a similar festival. Not taking off your shoes before you take off your trousers or jeans or similar. Risks of inflatable costumes, Easter bunnies and bilbies, experiments in blending tea, the character Arjun we wanted back, the equinox, finding unusual things on walks, getting on the wrong train at peak hour, and finally, I added in during the month, due to some interesting experiences with our new fur family members, strange interruptions to meditation. The poem is loosely based on that. It's called An Equinox Meditation with Pebble, which is also relating to today's Haushan words, which was the meaning of a pebble. I sat under an old ghost gum, my back against the silver blue, and turned a pebble in my palm, my mind moulded to its marks. Its story as the seasons swept the sharpness from its now soft sides and how it came to be so round, with no more angles to attach, but rolling on as feet and flood might pass and take it step by step. Each day to sit a different way, another view, another month. But as I focused back to breath, the softest sound slipped past my ears, a breath of something not my own, a brush of grass and turning leaves. I blinked against the dappled light and saw before I knew its name the twitching nose and whiskered lips of a bold intruder in my space. But when I blinked and looked again, the small newcomer was long gone, and I thought perhaps my mind had made this moment from the light and moving, made by grass and shadows long, that linger in the equal light, before the dusk and insect song that welcome in the equal night. Today's story is called Song of the Iron Rabbit. Are you sure dried blackberries are what you want to blend with gunpowder green? Xave asked Annae, quirking a pierced eyebrow at the dish in which she was creating her tea blend. Annae tossed her head, flicking her high ponytail so it hit Xave in the nose. Yes, it's going to be a badass tea, you know, one you could use in an apocalypse. Xave added calendula petals to some assam with a teaspoon. You know, this whole tea blending thing is meant to be relaxing, right? The apocalypse seems like a bit of a stressful context to bring into it. Annae rolled her eyes. I'm not that kind of chill person, Xave. Would you be if your 98-year-old gran was always doing live action role playing and trying weird sports and had a better Instagram than you? Xave got up and went to get them each a jar from the shelf at the back of the room. I'm not sure. I think on the whole, you probably just shouldn't think of your grandma as social media competition or tea blending as preparation for Armageddon. Shut up, Xave. Annae thought for a moment, then proceeded to put some coca nibs on top of the dried blackberries. An older woman across the workbench from them glanced at Annae with a judgmental expression. On the bench, next to Annae's very sweet-looking dish of tea, her phone lit up and made a clink sound. Annae slid her tea blend out of the way and did a squiggle on the phone's screen to unlock it. Xave sat back down with the jars and slid one in Annae's direction. He cleared his throat at her phone checking. Oh, leave me alone, Xave, Annae sighed. It's just Arjun trying to start a debate about Easter Bunny versus Easter Bilby. If I don't say something to get him off the topic, it'll go on for weeks. You know what he's like. Xave smiled and began spooning his gardener's arm into the jar. Which side are you on? Annae glared. None, I'm not getting into it. Xave raised his eyebrow again. All right, I like the Easter Bunny. It's an internationally acknowledged character that I've grown up with, but don't tell Arjun that I have an opinion. Annae set her phone purposefully aside and tried to appear more present, smirking at Xave. As the current coolest person Annae knew, Xave had an unusual capacity to convince Annae to try new things and not give up on activities partway through. She'd even been doing her best to join in with his mindfulness practice, something she'd resisted very strongly when her mum and her best friend gave it a go only months before. Xave, of course, did not know of this prior resistance and was not to find out under any circumstances. Arjun, meanwhile, was helping his dad, Baxter, load sound gear into the car. Baxter ran the local choir and had, this year, been fortunate enough to get a small choral group a performance spot at the Womadelaide festival. Since Baxter and Lena had the responsibility of taking equipment and setting up, they were driving over while Arjun was supposed to supervise the transport of the choral group members from a suburban campground where they'd rented cabins. This was happening by train. Now, are you sure you're happy to go with the choir, Arjun? Baxter was asking as he checked the cable ties on a box of microphone cables and power boards. Arjun frowned at his phone screen. Yes, Dad, I have all the train timetables in this app, and I'm going to WhatsApp all the singers the platform number in the afternoon. And I have an emergency bag with snacks and headphones and a power bank and tissues and hand sanitizer and bottled water and painkillers and band-aids pre-packed in my luggage. Baxter closed the boot of the car. Sounds like you have it under control. Just bear in mind, some of the older choir members might not have WhatsApp, so you might need to send some normal text messages as well. Arjun gave a small involuntary shudder at this, but nodded. Okay. Kumman, the family's large, fluffy, light ginger cat, wound around Arjun's legs at this point and jumped in the passenger side door of the car, which Baxter had left open. Meow, Arjun told the cat emphatically. You won't like Womad, Kumman. There'll be a lot of singing. He picked up the cat, setting Kumman's paws on his shoulders, and then quickly closed the car door. You have to stay and get looked after by Lorraine. You like her, remember? She brings treats. Baxter replied, looking sternly at the cat. Womad is definitely not a place for you, Cummin. We know what happens if you hear singing, don't we? Cummin flattened his ears. Baxter and Arjun were not the only ones preparing for a performance at the Womadelaide festival. Carter and his metal band, Iron Rabbit, were at this moment assembled in the multi-purpose room they'd hired at a local secondary school, gazing at a cardboard box full of rabbit costumes. The costumes had been the drummer Nigel's idea, in honour of both the band name and the fact that this year's Womad festival was unusually late and thus taking place close to Easter. I didn't realise they were going to be pink, Carter remarked, staring down at the suits with his hands stuffed firmly in the front pocket of his black Lincoln Park hoodie. Neither did I, answered Nigel, the drummer, miserably. He peered closer. I think they're supposed to be inflated. The other band members sighed and gave Nigel cross looks. Well, somebody had better put one on and find out whether you can play in it, Carter decided. Everyone looked at him. Carter took his hands out of his hoodie pocket and folded his arms. The others continued to look expectant. Oh, fine then, Carter sighed, pulling one of the costumes out of the box. He held it up and inspected it. Looks like you can just step in. He put one leg inside and began to wrestle the ankle part over his shoe, trying not to make any of the old man noises that he usually emitted nowadays when forced to reach towards his toes. The rabbit suit went about 3/4 of the way over Carter's sneaker and then became stuck at the heel. Carter hopped about for a moment before collapsing onto one of the plastic school chairs where he attempted to bunch up the rest of the rabbit suit in his arms and work at the stuck ankle piece by reaching around his knee. 5 minutes later, the entire band were engaged in trying to free Carter's foot. I think we're going to have to cut this elastic, Nigel grumbled. Does anyone have scissors? Well, then it won't inflate like it's supposed to, will it? The lead guitarist, Angie, complained. Do we really want it to do that? Carter murmured, glaring at the suit as he tried to bend his shoe free. His shoe, having been subjected to a lot of pushing and pulling in the last few minutes, now came off. It remained, however, caught in the ankle elastic of the rabbit costume, dangling like a sandbag from the end of Carter's foot. Take your leg out, Nigel told Carter, grabbing hold of the shoe. Carter did as he was told, and the band stood, gazing miserably at the box of costumes again, one of the garments now featuring a sneaker lodged in the ankle opening. Whilst this chaos was taking place at the Iron Rabbit's band practice, Annae and Xave were walking around the perimeter of where the Womadelaide festival was to take place. They'd planned on a walk in the park and botanical gardens, but had failed to consider the impact of the festival being set up on the walking areas that would be accessible. Since Xave wanted to see a well-known percussionist perform on Saturday, and Annae had undertaken to go and listen to her grandma's choral group, the pair had arranged to stay in town in Xave's uncle's apartment and had tickets for the entire weekend. Annae had never been to Womad before and was looking around curiously at the setup taking place when she tripped on something sticking up out of the ground. Ow, she exclaimed. WTF? Xave peered behind her to see what had caused the stumble. Is that? He went back and crouched down to tug at it. A tin whistle? Annae, regaining her composure, went to crouch beside him. Oh, yeah. I guess it must belong to someone performing. She tugged the whistle out of the ground. Some bits of dirt clung to the inside, so Annae wiped the mouthpiece with her sleeve and then blew into it, releasing a piercing shriek from the instrument. Xave blocked his ears. Annae? Annae glanced sideways at him. realizing this behaviour had been a bit uncultured of her. Should we take it to the registration tent or something? Xave shrugged and nodded. At the train station the next day, it was peak hour. This was a factor that had not occurred to Arjun when he agreed to oversee the transport of choir members from the campground to the city. It was loud, with blaring announcements that were difficult to understand over the noise of the commuters, and visually confusing, with multiple different signs and symbols clashing with the mismatched outfits of the crowd, and the need to avoid bumping into anyone. Arjun kept his eyes on the yellow safety line at the edge of the steps as he made his way up and over the overpass that led to platform 3. His handy phone app had indicated that this would be the right platform for the train to town, and Arjun had sent his message to the choral group members from the safety of his Airbnb. So this would be okay. All he had to do was get to platform 3 and stand where the choir members could find him. On the platform, singers Betty and Barb were already waiting. Betty sitting on the seat of her walking frame and taking selfies, and Barb busy knitting. Arjun and Betty waved to each other and said, "Meow," which made Arjun feel a bit better about the whole thing. When a few of the other singers arrived, some didn't have tickets yet, so Arjun sent Barb off with them, with directions to the ticket machines, and settled down to sit with Betty in comfortable silence, putting on his headphones to escape the noise. After some toing and froing, the choir all returned to wait with Arjun, and were soon chattering about the songs they'd be performing, while Arjun read an article on his phone about bilbies. After a while, though, it became obvious that the train was delayed. Arjun frowned at his phone, certain that the app was supposed to notify him about this sort of thing. And the choir members grumbled amongst themselves, some of them squinting at the light-up boards around the station, which seemed to be flickering and flashing and missing bits of their messages. Arjun was just complaining to Betty that the train was now 12 minutes overdue when the rails began to rattle and the train finally pulled up, drowning out another unintelligible announcement with its roar and beeping doors. Arjun replaced the left ear of his headphones, which he'd lifted to talk to Betty, as he led the way on board and assisted Betty to mind the gap. Soon, the choir was settled. Arjun congratulated himself on not even needing to use anything from the emergency bag so far, apart from his headphones. Operation Get Quiet Womadelaide was going well, despite the delay. The train Arjun had chosen was due to arrive in the city very early to allow for the probable slowness of some of the choir members leaving the station, so they would still be at the festival site in plenty of time. At Adelaide Campground, Carter and the members of Iron Rabbit were busy retuning their instruments and fighting over space in the cabin, which had much more comfortable beds than the van that Nigel had hired. Carter sat on a folding camp chair outside the van and sent another message to his sister Ella, requesting a photo update on his rabbit, Greg II. Ella had only been looking after Greg since the morning, but Carter felt that he needed to see what Greg was up to just as often as he would if he was at home, which was at least once an hour. Ella sent back a video of Greg chewing on a large willow stick in a manner which made the stick whack against the side of the rabbit's cardboard castle. The caption of the video was a single flat face emoji. Ella did not like erratic tapping noises. Carter was at a bit of a loss whilst the others were tuning and checking their equipment, owing to the fact that his instruments were a keytar, which just needed power, and an ocarina, which couldn't really be tuned, and his screaming voice, which he was currently resting. Since the only one of these to have any traditional level of popularity in metal music was the screaming, it was a continuous source of amazement and pride for Carter that Iron Rabbit had become quite successful and well known, at least locally. This was especially surprising since at the time of the band's formation, the youngest member was 75. So they certainly weren't winning their popularity through onstage acrobatics or magazine modelling potential. Whatever the reason may have been, though, audiences seem to have developed a fascination for Carter's ability to switch from melodic ocarina solo to screamo breakdown to soft soaring verse. Pictures of him with guitar slung low and ocarina hung about his neck on a strap, mouth open in the throes of heavy vocals, populated the internet, and the band's logo of rabbit ears, positioned to look like the metalhead's horns gesture, appeared on many gig posters. At Womad, Iron Rabbit had a spot on the large foundation stage, right before the headliners. Carter got up now from his camping chair and went to place his guitar and ocarina safely back in the van, pulling out his latest robotics project for something to work on while the others were busy checking their more extensive gear. Billbot 1.0 was Carter's Easter robot, created in the image of a bilby at the request of Ella, who wanted Carter to stick to native animals as the inspiration for his robot creature's shapes. Ever since his attempt to create a rabbit-like robot in his 20s had resulted in something a little too boxy, Carter's robots had been known as Wombot in various iterations, due to their faint resemblance to a wombat. He'd tried his best to convince friends and family that decades later he should be permitted to reattempt a robot rabbit. Instead, Billbot had evolved, a more agile marsupial mimicking cousin to Wombot, with longer legs and a flexible waist joint for moving in a bilby-like lollop. Carter set Billbot carefully down on the grass of the campsite next to the van and opened his laptop to inspect Billbot's latest code. Billbot mechanically loped off in the direction of the barbecue area, and Carter had to set down the laptop and hurry off in pursuit. Nigel, meanwhile, lugged a horribly familiar cardboard box with pink parachute fabric hanging out at the top, out of the van, and through the open door of the cabin. The tin whistle, having been turned over to a cross-looking organiser in a high-vis vest, Annae and Xave had found themselves a bench in a non-festival-affected corner of the botanical gardens, and settled in there to attempt meditation before returning to Xave's uncle's apartment for the evening. Annae was determined that Xave should perceive her as interested and engaged with the practice, and was perched with poise, straight-backed and cross-legged on the bench, as Xave set up an audio guide on his phone and passed her an earbud. She folded her hands in her lap and closed her eyes in an attempt to avoid any distraction from interesting passers-by or the antics of the ducks from the nearby pond. Xave hit play, and the soft voice of the instructor began to speak in Annae's left ear, telling her to sit comfortably and focus on the breath. Annae began to do as she was told, noticing the spreading and contracting of her ribs with each inhale and exhale, and only peeking at Xave out of her left eye one time to see if he was cute with his eyes shut. Unfortunately for Annae, Xave in fact did not have his eyes shut when she did this, but was instead looking with an expression of mild amusement at a duck which had tried to perch in a tree. Annae quickly closed her eye again and hoped that Xave hadn't noticed. Then her nose was itchy, but the soft-voiced instructor said she should try to notice such things without doing anything about them. So Annae just wrinkled her nose up and down like a rabbit and hoped this didn't count. The voice in the audio recording had just told them to shift their attention to the sensations of sitting when Annae heard footsteps swishing up the path. She tried not to open her eyes again. She was quite concerned that Xave might have seen her the last time. But then a voice said, hello, and it couldn't be avoided. Annae opened her eyes and saw a giant inflatable pink rabbit. WTF, she exclaimed. Xave opened his eyes too and let out a sound halfway between amusement and alarm, pulling the earbud out of his right ear. Sorry, spluttered the rabbit, who Annae could now see had a human face buried somewhere deep inside their alarming jaws. I just need a hand, and you seem to be the only other people over here. How can we help? Asked Xave with a rather fixed smile. Well, the rabbit began, looking sheepish. I put on my backpack, but in this costume, I can't seem to take it off again. It's got the device I need to deflate this suit in it, and also my keys to the cabin I'm staying in. Annae laughed. Why did you put the costume on over here? The rabbits spread their hands. I was trying to surprise my bandmates by proving it was possible to put these on by ourselves and still move about and do things. But I think I might have actually proved myself wrong. They hung their head. Plus, everyone else left to go to sound check while I was away, which I forgot about. So no one's over at the cabin to see me in the suit or to let me in. I guess they're probably wondering where you are then, Xave chuckled, standing up to try to pull the backpack from the rabbit's shoulders. What band are you in? Annae demanded, immediately zoning in on the potential famousness of the rabbit-suited individual. Iron Rabbit, replied the rabbit. I'm Nigel, the drummer. Annae jumped to her feet. Oh, I know you. You have the vocalist who plays guitar and ocarina. Yeah, answered Nigel, not sounding very excited about it. That's us. We'll come see you play, Annae promised. Won't we, Xave? Replied Xave, looking unsure. The train that Arjun and the choir members were sitting on had set off through a long tunnel in which Arjun's phone did not have reception to check the number of stops before the city. When daylight finally showed through the windows again, it took Arjun's phone a while to reconnect, which worried him a bit, but was probably fine because he actually knew there were 7 stops from looking over the map earlier. By the time they needed to pay attention, his phone would be back to keeping track. Anyway, the city was the end of the line, so it would be difficult for them to miss it. Arjun watched as his phone's reception bars slowly filled back up, feeling uneasy. Had there been any reception at the station? He'd been so busy keeping an eye on the choir members and trying to ignore all the other chaotic noise and bustle that he couldn't remember whether the bars had been full or not. And if they hadn't been, the loading bar moved across the screen, millimetre by painful millimetre, and finally the train's location reappeared on the stop chart, further from the city than before. We're going the wrong way, Arjun shouted in Betty's ear, much louder than necessary, owing to a combination of his alarm and the fact that he was still wearing his headphones. An interminable stop later, a very kind station attendant turned Arjun and the choir around and changed their tickets to the correct sort, and half an hour later than intended, the group were at Adelaide Station. Arjun sheepishly guided the choir members onto the tram and stood next to where Betty sat in the accessible seats, trying to decide what he ought to do once they arrived. His dad might be cross because the choir was late for sound check, and that was stressful. Or the choir might not be due for sound check until later, and Baxter might be off somewhere else talking to organisers and not even realise the choir weren't there yet. Or the situation might be one of a whole host of other possibilities that he hadn't thought of and shouldn't, because there are too many, and considering them was like launching off into space without a plan or a destination. Arjun got his phone back out of his jeans pocket and pulled up the WhatsApp conversation with Annae. The last message currently read, "Not debating this with you. Bunnies and bilbies are both cute." Arjun tapped in the new message box. "Hi, Annae. Can you meet me at the front gate? The train did unexpected things. Now I don't know what to expect." He hit send. The 3 dots appeared as the choir group clambered back out of the tram, and Arjun glanced at the phone intermittently as he handed all the choir members their performer passes. Eventually, a message appeared. "Is my grandma still with you?" Arjun looked at Betty approaching the entrance in front of him. "I can't tell whether you want the answer to be yes or no," he messaged back. "But she's just going in with the choir." Annae was typing for some time. "She's embarrassing, but also cool," the reply came eventually. "I'm with Xave, but he's expecting me to be zen, and I suck. Gonna leave with the members of Iron Rabbit and come find you." Annae and Arjun let the choir make their own way into soundcheck and set off on a lap around the perimeter, away from the noise and bustle of everyone setting up, warming up, sound checking, and running through. Easter and the rabbit being associated with it is related to the spring equinox, Arjun told Annae without introduction. But here in Australia, it's not the spring equinox this time of year, it's autumn, so it doesn't really make sense to associate rabbits with Easter here. We might as well raise the profile of a native animal that needs recognition because it's endangered and is more likely to be able to deliver surprises. Not that an animal would really leave chocolate, obviously, but it's a marsupial and it has a pouch. Replied Annae. "Hey, look, what's that over there?" She pointed at a little shape on the ground near a stand of Moreton Bay fig trees. Arjun peered in the same direction and saw something that was shaped very much like the bilby he'd just been talking about. He and Annae snuck closer, taking care not to scare it. But then the bilby moved, and it didn't really look like a bilby anymore. "I think this is a robot," Arjun exclaimed, racing over to it. "WTF!" exclaimed Annae. The bilby-shaped robot made a chirpy beep beep and rose up on its hind legs towards Arjun. "Hello," Arjun said, cautiously picking it up. The robot unfolded itself to lie flat in his arms. Annae eyed Arjun and the robot with a complicated expression. "I'm guessing this probably belongs to someone, Arjun," she cautioned. On Saturday, Iron Rabbit prepared to take to the stage in somewhat subdued mood. It had been discovered after soundcheck that Carter's Billbot robot had gone missing. Whilst the other band members didn't really understand Carter's robotics activities, they did understand that Carter put a lot of time into his robots, and Billbot had captured the interest of the others with its cute exploring behaviours and sounds. Without really discussing it further, the band went ahead with wearing the rabbit costumes, quietly helping each other into the pieces and inflating the suits as though this was a normal, serious part of their pre-performance routine. The slightly sad giant pink rabbits shuffled towards the stage, shoeless because no one had realised that they wouldn't be able to reach their feet to replace their shoes once the suits were in. At the same time, Baxter's choir were finishing their performance on one of the smaller stages, and they, Xave and Arjun, gathered in the audience, applauding. "Well done, Grandma," Annae told Betty, helping to guide Betty's walking frame away from the stage. "It's very strange that it's all over," Betty complained. "I feel like we've been rehearsing for that forever." "Well," Annae told her, "I think you might like what we're going to watch next." Betty gave her a sceptical look, pursing her lips, which were currently lipsticked in a bright orange colour like marigolds. "What might that be?" she inquired. "Iron Rabbit," Annae answered. "It's your neighbour Ella's brother's band, Grandma. They're all retired age and they play heavy metal." She winked at Xave. "I thought you might find them inspiring." Betty patted her perm. "I don't know. Heavy metal is very noisy music." "That's true," Arjun agreed nervously. Maybe we should give them a chance, though, Xave suggested. Annae has seen them online, and apparently Carter plays ocarina. With a little more persuasion, the group followed Annae's lead to join the large crowd gathered around the foundation stage, and Annae made them form a snake and worm their way through to the front. Backstage, the sock-footed, bunny-suited band assembled. Right, Carter told them. The show must go on. He felt anxious on the inside. Some of the lyrics were cryptically about rabbits, which also made him think of bilbies and billbot, and he was worried that that would make him sad. One of the other things Carter was rather well known for in his social circles was, unfortunately, crying, which wasn't very helpful when you were trying to sing. Nonetheless, the band trooped on stage, and the crowd cheered furiously. Nigel waved to some young people in the front row, and Carter spotted, to his surprise, his sister's neighbour, Betty, standing with them. He waved, but then realised that all the band members looked alike in the rabbit suits, and Betty wouldn't recognise him. Then, in what seemed to Carter like slow motion, one of the young people adjusted their jacket, and there, nestled down in their arms, was Billbot. Carter waved wildly, then winced, having pulled something in his back. "Billbot," he shouted, "you're alive!" Since the microphone was already on, these were the words that introduced Iron Rabbit that evening. "Is this yours, Carter?" shouted the young person Carter now faintly recognised as Betty's granddaughter, Annae, pointing at Billbot in the other youngster's arms. "Yes," bellowed Carter, grinning, although the audience couldn't see his grin because of the rabbit costume. Reassured that Billbot was safe and well, Carter leaned down to lift his guitar off the stand, or rather tried to, only to discover that the inflatable rabbit suit prevented him from reaching it. Angie came over and assisted him, as Nigel slowly squeezed his suit in behind the drum kit. Carter waited for Nigel to get settled, then gave him a nod, and they counted in. Now, I'm going to have to do this very quietly because I think the rabbits might be scared if I try to do screaming. So we're going to do whispered. "Oh, I don't chill out when I'm chilling my house because I'm a bun, screamed Carter, playing a synth bass riff on the guitar. "And I won't stay out of any part of your house. Escape is fun. Pretty fun, right?" Annae yelled in Betty's ear out in the crowd. Betty winced at the volume from the front of house speakers, but she nodded her head. Arjun seemed to have forgotten the volume too, in his fascination with this elderly guitar-wielding robot programmer. And Xave looked like he wasn't sure what to think, but Annae decided she didn't especially care. "Iron Rabbit, got big pointy teeth. Iron Rabbit, I get under your feet. Iron Rabbit, I'll be sleeping all day, but when you're trying to sleep, that's when it's time to play." Halfway through the third song, Nigel got his rabbit suit caught on the snare drum and punctured it, and it deflated slowly, making fart-like sounds into the mics that were set against the kit. Carter discovered, upon trying to play his first ocarina solo, that the head of the rabbit costume did not actually allow him to bring the instrument to his mouth. And he had to tear open the hood during an improvised drum solo using Angie's guitar pick. And to top it all off, when they got off stage, the band members discovered that their changes of clothes were back at the campground, and they could not get out of the rabbit suits to greet the fans, which made for some very entertaining photos, especially of Nigel, whose costume now looked more like a pink shower curtain with eyes on top. Nevertheless, they smiled as they made their way back down the road in borrowed shoes. Carter and Billbot reunited, and Arjun following closely in Carter's wake, asking about Billbot's programming. They laughed when everyone made the mistake of taking off the costume before the borrowed shoes and ended up shuffling round with pink parachute fabric tying their feet together looking for scissors. Betty parked her walking frame next to the band van and observed all this with glee and her phone out, getting pictures for Instagram. So what do you think of them, Grandma? Annae asked her, leaning against the van beside her. I think if they can be rock musicians, so can I, Betty replied. I've heard capes are very fashionable in some kinds of rock bands, so my vampire outfits would come in very handy. Carter looked up from where he was showing Arjun some of Billbot's code on the laptop. Go for it, Betty, he told her. Lots of bands are looking for drummers, I hear, if you're thinking of learning an instrument. I shall put it on my 100 list, Betty replied. A few eyebrows were raised. Her list of 100 things to do before or on her 100th birthday, Annae supplied, smirking. Suddenly, Arjun turned to Carter with an air of scandal. Carter, was Billbot once a rabbot? He pointed at something on the laptop. Carter laughed. Oh, yes, I'm rather fond of rabbits, as you might be able to tell from the band. He got out his phone and showed them a rather scruffy, very large, grey and white rabbit on the screen. This is Greg II. Arjun frowned, but peered closer. Why are his ears like that? Oh, Carter smiled. He's skeptical. Arjun looked incredulous. I don't think rabbits get skeptical. Uh-oh, said Annae. Rabbits have lots of expressions and emotions, Carter told Arjun. I'm working on making Billbot's ears movable so he can use them in the same way. He pressed a few buttons on the computer, and at their feet, Billbot put both ears up and slightly forward. If he was a rabbit, this would mean Billbot was curious, Carter said. Arjun nodded. Ah, so they use their ears instead of meows. Annae glanced at Betty. He'll be talking with kangaroos next. Don't you think that bilbies are kind of better than rabbits for our Easter, though? Arjun pressed. Carter shrugged. In the wild, sure. In being cute, I think they're equal. I mean, bilbies are rare and beautiful, but you've seen Greg. Baxter and some of the other choir members had approached while this discussion was going on, and Baxter now glanced at his phone clock. Equal like the day and night, he remarked. Happy equinox, folks. Oh, sighed Annae, winter is coming. Well then, we'd better have some fun and hear some music while it's still warm enough, Betty declared. Agreed, replied Carter. And the unlikely group of choristers and metal musicians, rabbit lovers and bilby advocates, robots and organic life forms, young and old, made their way back up the road into the throng of Womad. A rocking chorus about rabbits on a loop in their heads, and the determination of shortening days in their hearts, to find the music and the art that spoke to them all. Because whether you speak in meows, ears, human words, or something else altogether, there are some things that make sense in all languages, and music and the turn of seasons are two of them.
We'd better do a quick bunny here for a photo.
Nice.
All right, we're bunnies.
Ready?
Yeah. Right, so topics for next time.
Right.
Got any requests?
Rocking dog toys. No.
Dog toys.
Pets
I think
scoring and
training-
stuff, Lloyd says.
Training
Methods of
failures are good.
Methods of tipping
Training
a game of footy.
failures could be animals or.
I've got a good one.
Oh, good.
Yep.
I'm not quite sure how to explain this. So I'll just tell you the anecdote and you can figure out what you think this is. Yeah. So months ago, Dave and I were staying at a campgrounds and going to this event, and we knew that you needed a code to get out through the gate of the campgrounds. Right. And so we were going up there to try and get out, and we tried the code heaps of times and it didn't work. We tried again, it didn't work, and we just couldn't get out through the gate. So we gave up. We went all the way back down the stairs and went out the other way. And the next day we discovered the gate was just unlocked. It was just unlocked and open. We had assumed that there was a system and there were rules. So we didn't even bother trying to just open the gate. Because we were like, it's a code, so it'll be locked because that's the system. Yeah. So I guess like
when the
following
deceive you
too much or something. Make you assume things.
Rules making you misinterpret, or I don't quite
or something.
But, I'll write down rules or systems.
They make you expect complications when there are none.
Too confident in a system working.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm all about
making something obvious.
Yeah, making you overlook the obvious. Yeah.
Making
things are much easier than you think.
This cat's making a mess.
Oh yes, Mum was saying maybe we should explain our catastrophe from today. Yes. But it really was just a classic catastrophe in that Mum had a bit of pizza on, or a crust of pizza on her little table, and Nutmeg came and put her paws up on it, and her paws got stuck in the tablecloth, and she pulled the whole tablecloth with all of the things on it onto the floor. Right. So it's just a classic cat accident.
Cat.
Well, that fits what Lloyd was saying, pets destroying your stuff.
Right, well, there you go. I will second that.
Yeah.
My thing related to that is when your pets are being defiant. You know, people think that little things that we control, but really we don't. You know, I had to take Midnight to the vet to get the vet to give her a tablet, and it took them several goes because she's just like, no.
Yeah.
You know, he puts it in, you hold it, they swallow, and then she spits it out a minute later. Just no.
So fun.
Like your beautiful headdress, Sarah. I think.
I thought they might.
There we go.
I think that could well be happening.
Yeah.
You could have a special occasion disaster where the garlands are left somewhere and the rabbit is eaten.
I mean, I am all for decorations that can be eaten. So you're not having plastic waste.
Can I take it? I want to take a screenshot, but I don't know how.
Any more topics?
Interesting.
Oh, but with the pets thing, my favourite reason for posties not delivering items that I've seen from online is, you know, Black Cat said no. You know. I don't think it was a delivery. I think it was like a meter checker. So they were meant to come on the property, but like at the fence line there was a cat that was just like no.
That's great. So like weird reasons for not delivering a parcel.
Or weird reasons for wanting to. So the Centralis man, we've had to put like side fences because we've learnt to our dismay that River has to be allowed to come into season. So she has to be very secure in the yard. But so she's in the back area. She can no longer go to the front. And the chap from Centralis delivers here, you know, they'll do a home order. And last time he came, he left me a nice little text message. Have put the goods on the back table away from the puppy. And I sent him back, thanks very much, that sounded like a good idea. Well, he arrived this time with Sarah's lovely Easter things for Barry. And he was really disappointed because he was looking forward to seeing the dog.
Aww.
We're thinking, would he like permission to come through the side gate and come into the backyard?
All right, any other things? Lots of pet-related ones.
Yeah,
I can give you a technology one. I've spent the last 2 days trying to make things talk to each other. I tried every possible methodology you could name, and it still doesn't happen. But the worst bit is that sometimes it does happen, and then other times it doesn't. And you go all the way back through all the sequence of events you've done. This is plugged into that. That one's got this thing saying, yes, it can do that. And this one's doing that. That one's doing this. And that's on that channel. And this is on that channel. That's enabled to do there. And then it works. And then when you load the program back up and say, play again, it doesn't.
Intermittent success, yeah.
Drives you up.
You know how you had intermittent fault, like this is intermittent success with technology. Yeah.
It's just, I think it's a box that's
intermittent success.
It's a box that says, no, I'm not doing that.
There's some kind of
I'm not doing that. You could go away. No.
Yeah, sometimes you get a bee in your bonnet. I do it with the house too, where I'm like, okay, like maybe I should take the carpet off the stairs. And then you start, and it ends up being like a 5-day project to try and finally get these things off and scrape it up. And you're just like, and I always call up Dad going, had a bee in my bonnet. And I just started a thing around the house that's now going to take forever and I don't actually know how to do.
Is this a good idea?
Yeah. We have a story like that too, because we got our internet connected, which is wonderful. But the modem is right above the rabbit area. Because that's where the lines come in. So the lines are nicely hidden behind some carpet tiles that Velcro onto the wall, and that's all fine. But the modem itself is too big. It can't be there. So we said, okay, we need a shelf. And we spent a lot of time looking up how to put things on these concrete walls that we've got. And then all these people drilling into concrete walls or brick, and this works, and you just need the plugs and the right drill mode and everything. Okay, we can do that. Got the masonry bit. Drill can do hammer mode, that's fine. We've got some plugs to help it connect, and we went and bought this shelf, and we bought these special invisible things that are meant to, like, prongs come out the wall and they go in the back of the shelf, and then slots on to hold the shelf in place from below. So Lloyd tries to drill. And the stud finder, at great expense, got the stud finder so we could locate the electrical wires and not hit anything or zap ourselves or drill into a pipe or something like that. Okay, the wall's clear, and so Lloyd tries to drill these holes. Well, this concrete is crumbly. It has rocks in it. So the drill will go for a bit and then it'll hit a rock and it will bounce off of where you made like the pencil mark to say I want to drill here. It actually drilled there. The like were on an angle because one had bounced off out of position and the other hadn't. Okay, we managed to straighten it up. They went on, and then we put the shelf on, and it was just totally wobbly. Like, it was really, it was going to fall down on them. So then we had to go all the way back to the hardware, get the putty, the paint scraper, find the paint that was for this wall, and spend just like, is this the one? Is this the one? Because there are all these different greys in the shed here. Paint, fix it all up, paint over it. Still don't have a shelf for the modem.
You don't have a shelf.
We had to go online shopping for a freestanding, little hallway table thing to act as a shelf. Which we got, but the first one was like, this is perfect, we'll get this one. And it looked fine, and then after I'd put it on click and collect, we scrolled through the pictures, and the last picture showed it from a different angle, in which you could see it only had legs on the front, and the back was, guess what? Meant to be onto the wall. So this was basically our weekend last weekend. We'll just quickly do this job. Needs to be done. No. Always.
So annoying. Mum and I actually had the opposite of that experience recently, where we got an electrician to come in to look at a bunch of things that we thought were going to be like that, where it's going to be more complicated, and I'll bet they'll discover something that'll be something else, it'll have to be something else. And then everything was really simple. It was just like, this light bulb is flickering because the wiring in the light fixture is too old. So you just swap out the light fixture. Done. Solved. And we were thinking like, oh, rats have chewed on the wiring in the ceiling or something.
Actual light.
It was just the wire on the
so it wasn't in the roof or anything.
It was.
Wow.
It was just a light fixture. So they just took that out and it was fine.
That's why sometimes professionals are good, where it's like, I could do this thing myself.
Or maybe you should write that down, get a professional.
Get a professional.
Get a professional.
Yes, that's a good one.
Just get a professional.
Just get a professional.
And that can encompass all of that, like chain reaction. It's a lot more complex than you thought. Well, maybe it's not.
Yes.
It's not because you got
it. Maybe it's not.
And you just
you
didn't try and do it yourself. Yeah.
I will just add a quick special occasion recipe disasters.
Right.
Because we've had a lot of success with Barry's diabetes using high protein bread. So there are a couple of commercial brands that now make a very high protein bread. And they use things like, instead of standard flours, they use wheat protein and soy protein and pea protein, whatever. And they do have a little bit of standard flour, but basically that's how they do it, and have lots of seeds and things like that. I can do that with my hot cross buns because I've been varying them for years.
Yep.
But I kind of went a little bit overboard. So I basically used very little basic flour. So for 4 cups, I had one wholemeal spelt one. And I had like pea protein and bee salmon flour and almond meal, all that one. Well, they are they taste really good, but they are.
Are they rock hard?
They are rock buns. Yeah. Anyway, so what's our date?
Our date for next time is the 13th of May at the same time. Now we are in winter time for Australia, so that's early 6:30, possibly pre-food start, and 10 o'clock for the UK.
Excellent.
If anybody thinks of any further things you'd like, feel free to message them to me and I'll add them in. I'll see you on the 13th.
Happy Easter, everybody.
Love to everyone. Happy Easter.
Bye.
Happy Easter, everybody.